Hello students, let's get back to our chapter 6 from the supplementary reading, Weathering the Storm in Irsama, written by Harsh Mander. Now, dear students, the other day we saw that this 19-year-old Prashant, who had gone to his friend's house, encounters a storm, a cyclone, and knows that the devastated state of the house of the village, and that would be the state of his house too, wants to go back to his family and get reunited with them. And so he begins his journey back to his home. Let's see now how does it go and what does he do. He equipped himself with a long sturdy stick and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village through the swollen flood waters. It was a journey he would never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road. Now, students, he equipped himself. He equipped with many things, maybe especially the stick is mentioned over here. He had taken some things just to protect him, and so a sturdy stick, and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition. Expedition is a journey, and so students, he decides to go back because his friend's house was 18 kilometers away from his place, and then he decides to go back to his village through the swollen floodwaters because there was a lot of water on the way. It was a journey he would never forget, and that was a typical journey which he had never done in his life, and he would never forget. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road. He constantly had to use the stick to locate the road. What do you mean by locate the road? Why he had to use that? Students, because the roads were flooded and he had a difficulty to find his way. So the stick will help him in case there was a pothole, there was any gutter, how deep the water is. In order to check all that, he was using that stick. Now he was determined, but before that, just look at the picture. Look at this picture. He is going back. See, the stick shows how much water is there. Accordingly, he will guess how he will come to know the level of the water. It is deep waist. It is up to the waist. He is deep in the water. You can also see the two other people. So he was determined to determine where the water was most shallow. So the stick would help him. At places it was waist deep and progress was slow. Some places there was a shallow water, some places the deep that was up to the waist, and so the progress was slow. When there is a lot of water, he was taking time to go through the water. At several points he lost the road and had to swim. He also forgot he lost the road, lost the way, and he had to swim back. After some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So he says, I showed you these two people, and they happened to be his uncle's friends. So he was relieved. He was very happy that there's someone who is known to him was there. They will go now together. And so they decided to move ahead together. As they waded through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. Now, students, what happened as they were going through the water, as they were wading, as they were going through the water, what happened? They saw certain scenes. They were like very macabre. Macabre is a ghastly. The scenes were so shocking that could not believe their eyes. Okay, they had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. So what happened, students? So as they were walking, his uncle's two friends and Prashant, as they were walking, three of them, what did they saw? They saw some human bodies, the dead bodies, okay? Also the bodies of the dead animals, the carcasses, okay? Carcasses, the dead bodies of the dogs, goats, cattle. And so they had to just swept against the bodies and then move ahead. They had no other way. They could not help themselves. Then, in every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. Every village, hardly they could see a house standing because the houses were carried away by the water. There was a lot of water, and so they were devastated, they were destroyed. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. Okay, so Prashant is crying loudly, little longer, because he was sure that his family will not survive of this catastrophe. What is the meaning of catastrophe? It's a disaster. Even this disaster, this incident which has taken place, surely must have damaged his family also, has ruined his house, his family too. So he was now crying loud, but he does not give the hope. Eventually, Prashant reached his village, Kalikuda. So the name of the Prashant's village is Kalikuda. His heart went cold. He got so much fear that he was wondering whether he will be able to see his family now. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. So when he saw his house was not there, his house also was carried off by the water, carried away by the water, and so he was feeling very bad. The remnants, what is the meaning of the remnants? The remnants is some leftover, that is some parts of the building, some parts of the house were remaining behind, and so his heart went cold. He knew now his family must have been also washed away in the water. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. So some of their belongings, maybe some clothes or some things and all, they were mangled and twisted in the branches of the trees. As the trees were there, he must have seen maybe his clothes or maybe his bag or whatever it is, and so he could see all that in that dark water. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So the Red Cross had already reached over there to help the people, and so he decides to go to see the family over there where they would have taken a shelter. Among the first people he saw in the crowd was his maternal grandmother. So in the crowd he was able to see his maternal grandmother, his mummy's mummy, weak with hunger. She rushed to him, her hands outstretched, her eyes brimming. It was a miracle. They had long given him up for dead. So students, what happened when he went to the Red Cross refugee camp over there? He saw first and foremost his maternal grandmother, and she was looking very weak with hunger. She must have not eaten for 2 days. She rushed to him. As soon as she saw Prashant, she ran towards him, her hands outstretched, as if ready to embrace Prashant. Her eyes brimming. Her eyes became bright. Eyes were full of joy because they were thinking Prashant would have surely died, but Prashant was not dead. Prashant was alive. It was a miracle. They say it was a miracle to see Prashant alive. Quickly, word spread, and his extended family gathered around him and hugged him tight in relief. So his extended family, maybe mummy's brother, daddy's brothers, whoever were there, they gathered around him. They were thinking he was already dead. They hugged him tight in relief. They gave a sigh of relief. Thank God that Prashant is alive. They were very happy. His brother and sister, his uncles and aunts, they all seemed to be dead. So his brother, sister, his cousins, his uncle, aunties, all were there. They all seemed to be there. All were very happy to see Prashant back. By the next morning, he took, in the desperate situation in the shelter, he decided to get a grip over himself. So by the next morning, as he took in the desperate situation in the shelter in the Red Cross, he decided to get a grip over himself. He has decided to come out of whatever the situation was, whatever has happened. If he remains into that, if the house is gone and all, he thinks of all that, then you know that he will not be able to come out of it. So he decides that he wants to take control over himself. He wants to take control of himself and get out of this situation. And then he sensed a deadly grief settling upon the 2,500 strong crowd in the shelter. So in the shelter, in the Red Cross shelter, there were 2,500 people. That was a big crowd. 86 lives were lost in the village. 86 people had been dead in this cyclone. All the 96 houses had been washed away. It was their 4th day at the shelter. So far, they had survived on green coconuts, but there were too few to go around such a tumult of people. So what happened? Students, so far they had survived on what? On the coconut water, because the tree had fallen there on the house, and so they would pluck the coconut, drink the water, and somehow they were managing on it. But how long they could do? How long they could go? And what is the meaning of the tumult, student, over here? Uproar. Okay? And so now it was already the 4th day in the shelter. Prashant, all of 19 years, decided to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. So Prashant thinks, if no one else does, whatever it is, the age doesn't matter, but what matters, your leadership qualities. If you are able to do something, if you are determined, if you are focused on to helping the people, you will reach your goal. So what Prashant says, though he was 19-year-old, he decides to step in as leader of his village if no one else did. If no one else does that, he would do that. He organized a group of youths and elders to jointly pressurize the merchant once again to part with his rice. So to part with his rice. So what he does, he gathers the youth, the elders, and with joint pressure, pressurize the merchant once again. There was a merchant to part with his rice. Whatever rice you have to give up, because in that way we will be able to keep the people alive, survive. This time the delegation succeeded and returned triumphantly, wading through the receding water with food for the entire shelter. So this time they were successful. They were wading through the water. They were coming from the water and receding. Receding means the level of the water was reducing. And so they waded through, they walked through the water, and they brought whatever food they wanted to bring it to the shelter. How many people were there in the shelter, students? 2,500 people were there. 86 people were dead and 96 houses were washed away in this water. Now what happens? As they had brought the food in the shelter, no one cared that the rice was already rotting. So rice was already getting spoiled, but nobody cared about it, because what happened? It was decaying, the rice was getting decayed, but they did not bother, as all were hungry, all needed. Branches from the fallen trees were gathered to light a reluctant and slow fire on which to cook the rice. So what happened? Though they did not have enough fireplace and all was a problem, but they gathered, even the branches were wet. They said, we will try our best, even it is slow, we will get some food to eat. For the first time in 4 days, the survivors at the cyclone shelter were able to fill their bellies. So what happened? Their bellies, they were able to fill, bellies meaning over here stomach, they were able to fill themselves just because of the some food that they got over there. His next task was to organize a team of youth volunteers to clean the shelter of filth, urine, vomit and floating carcasses, and to tend to the wounds and fractures of the many who had been injured. So what was the next task? First is that they managed to give some food. The merchant who had, they told the merchant, you have to part with your rice if you have to survive, as the rice was getting decayed. But then also people did not bother about it. Second thing, they collected the twigs, they collected the branches in order to lit the fire, in order to light the fire. Fire was slow. It was not ready to, because the wood was wet. But then also they are managing it. They managed to fill their stomach in this 4 days time. And now the next task, the next work that he wants to do is that gather the youth and the volunteers who were ready to clean all the filth. The urine, people had been vomiting over there. And you know, this flood and all brings a lot of sickness. And so therefore they had to clean that place. The people who were fractured, wounded, to clean their wounds. And also, of course, the carcasses, the dead bodies of the animals to be removed from there, otherwise sicknesses will increase. On the 5th day, a military helicopter flew over the shelter and dropped some food parcels. It then did not return. So what happened, students? Few days back, military helicopter, they got some help from the military, and that was some food packets. Some food packets were dropped down for the people. It then did not return. It was only done once. So the youth task force gathered empty, looked at how they are lying on the floor, and the people asking for the food so that the military troop can come and help again. Utensils and from the shelter. So now the youth task was to gather some utensils from the shelter. Then they deputed the children to lie in the sand left by the waters around the shelter with these utensils on their stomachs to communicate to the passing helicopters that they were hungry. So what idea they did is that Prashant made some of the children lying on the floor with the utensils, whatever utensils were there, maybe the plate or the whatever vessels were there, glasses and all, just lie down with that. So that military helicopters, as they pass by, they may see that these people are still lying there and will come to know that they were hungry. Who were hungry? The children and the people in the camp. The message got through, and after that the helicopter made regular rounds of the shelter, airdropping food and other basic needs. So the message was clear by that the people are hungry and they need the food and the shelter. So the helicopter did the regular rounds and managed to give them the food and the shelter. Then Prashant found that a large number of children had been orphaned. So many people had lost their family members. Many children had lost their parents. Okay, and they were orphaned. He brought them together and put up a polythene sheet shelter for them. So he gathered the children who had become orphaned, put a polythene sheet for the shelter, like as we say that the tent or a tambu, somewhat like that. And so student, what he did is that so that the people can take shelter under, the children can take shelter under this tent. Women were mobilized to look after them, while the men secured food and materials for the shelter. So what happened? Women had to look after the children who were orphaned, children who were sick and all, whereas the men were given the task of what? To secure food and materials for the shelter. The people who were there to get the shelter and all. And so in this way, Prashant is taking the leadership qualities. Prashant is becoming expert. He is trying to also help the people in this way. So students, I am going to stop over here. Today is the second part of the topic, second part in a sense. First part, half the lesson I had finished, 1/3. Today I have finished little more, and the next part we shall see tomorrow. Please students, write the meanings which I have given it to you yesterday. Learn them by heart and read the lesson. Have a good day.